Can we resume our seats, please? Members, item 12 is notices of motion. And our first notice of motion is Councillor Donnelly to move. Councillor.
Point of order.
Alderman Hussey, point of order.
Standing Order 6.1, Section 2, which reads as follows. A motion shall be rejected if the wording or nature of the motion is considered unlawful or improper. And I refer members to the Declaration Against Terrorism that all councillors will have signed. And the statement is, I declare that if I am returned to be a councillor for the above named district, I will not by word or deed express support for or approval of any organisation that is for the time being a prescribed organisation specified in Schedule 2 to the Terrorism Act 2000. Can I ask for a clarification on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. I'll refer to the Council Solicitor.
Yeah.
Thank
you, Mayor. Members, you'll recall that on the 17th of September, the Council received correspondence from the Home Office in response to the previous notice of motion opposing the prescription of Palestine Action. Just to quote from that correspondence, it states that those who want to oppose the prescription of this group can do so freely and lawfully. That is not in itself an offence. It is an offence when protest is focused on showing support for an organisation that has been prescribed. Councillor Donnelly's motion specifically references opposition to the prescription of Palestine Action. The expression of solidarity with prisoners of past must therefore be interpreted as support solely for their opposition to that prescription. The action in the motion is to meet with prisoners' families and to assist efforts to, and I quote, bring this to a resolution. I have taken this to be the hunger strike. To be clear, this council cannot adopt a motion supporting the actions of Palestine Action. To do so would currently be unlawful, and members should be cognizant of this when speaking to this motion. However, they can speak to their opposition to the prescription of this group. And that's how I've interpreted the motion.
Doctors different, patients stay.
Sorry?
Doctors differ and patients stay.
Okay, Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, and one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Just have you a seconder for your motion. Councillor Gallagher.
In line with Council's corporate position of opposition to the British government's authoritarian prescription of Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation, Council is concerned regarding the decision by political prisoners imprisoned as a result of Palestine Action activism to embark on a hunger strike. Council expresses our solidarity with the prisoners and their families. Council further agrees to a cross-party and independent delegation to meet with prisoner families and representatives to assist efforts to bring this to a resolution. Chair, at the minute, there are currently 6 political prisoners on hunger strike in prison in Britain. Amu Ghib, Quessar Sura, John Sink, Eva Mirazi, T. Hoxa, and Cameron Ahmed are already well in a hunger strike over several weeks. They've been imprisoned. The allegations is for activism opposing genocide, dismantling, decommissioning weapons of death and destruction that is used in ongoing genocide. And I say ongoing because there is a so-called ceasefire, and as has been pointed out here earlier, over 1,000 people have died since that so-called ceasefire, and thousands of buildings have been destroyed, and the same genocidal regime has began attacking, it has started attacking targets in Lebanon. Chair, these prisoners have been subject to systematic abuse, ghosting, psychological and physical mistreatment. And as a result of that, they've began a prison protest. We have our own experiences of the British state's treatment of prisoners. And over a century, many Irish prisoners have used hunger as a means of resistance, and many have lost their lives, resulting in terrible consequences for families, communities. The same British system is in operation in this part of Ireland and uses draconian legislation, deadlocked non-jury courts, and it wasn't that long ago, Chair, that this council agreed on a motion regarding a strike by Republican prisoners in Maghaberry. We have a corporate position of this council, and it's the opposition to the ban on Palestine action. We support those resisting genocide, and during our own prison protests and struggle, solidarity came from all over the world in support of Irish political prisoners. The ongoing campaign by prisoners in England is being ignored by the media and the same regime, a regime that still has an ongoing criminalisation policy towards Irish political prisoners. So, Chair, in line with our corporate position, I would ask fellow councillors to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Is your seconder want to address the motion? Any other indicated speaker? Councillor Murphy.
Goramagat, Councillor Donnelly, for bringing forward the motion. We're supportive of the motion, and in the spirit of international solidarity, we oppose the criminalisation of any activists campaigning against an ongoing genocide. We look forward to meeting and hearing from the families affected. Goramagat.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor, it's very short and sweet. I'd just like to put on record my opposition to the British government's prescription of Palestine action and state my support for Councillor Donnelly's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in, and just state that we would have been in a similar position as Alderman Hussey and will be opposing the motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. And I want to thank Councillor Donnelly for bringing forward this motion today. I think it's very important that this council highlight what's happening to the Filton 24 and bring attention to the fact that 6 members of the Filton 24 are on hunger strike right now. I think that they are imprisoned because they have tried to stop genocide and because they have tried to stop crimes against humanity. It's not they that should be imprisoned. It's people who are complicit in the British government who should be behind bars for what's been inflicted on the Palestinian people. I think we should do everything we can as a council to end this hunger strike and support the prisoners' demands. There's been, at this point now, probably thousands of people arrested in Britain for opposing the prescription of Palestine action, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. People will have seen images of elderly people being arrested in London. Here in Derry and across the north, there's been consistent protests opposing the prescription of Palestine action. A number of people, including myself and Councillor Donnelly, have been issued letters from the PPS threatening charges on the Terrorism Act for showing support for Palestine action. So has Eamon McCann, Kate Nash, Catherine Hutton, Grady Horgan, and a number of other people. We believe that there's absolutely no justification for these threats. And there is no justification for the criminalisation of the Palestine solidarity movement. Obviously, what the prisoners are going through right now in British jails is far worse than receiving a letter. People are literally putting their lives on the line here in solidarity with the Palestinian people. So I think it's up to Council to do everything we can, and I think that this motion will help with that. Mayor, I would like to propose that if this motion is accepted, that it be sent to every single council across the 32 counties of Ireland and every council in Britain as well. I think that this will help raise the issue and break through the censorship This proposal's supported by the mover. I'm happy to write it up if necessary, but I'm hoping
Councillor.
that proposing it will be okay.
Councillor Harkin, are you content that we deal with this motion first and then deal with yours, or are you making your proposal as an amendment to this?
Well, this would be a slight amendment to this motion, which I'm happy to write up if necessary.
Okay, have you a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Raymond Barr seconded. Does any other member wish to speak to the amendment? Alderman Hussey.
To the entire motion, including the amendment, I still am of the opinion that this is an unlawful motion and would caution councillors to think very carefully about supporting an unlawful motion. Thank you. Mayor.
Any other member wish to address the amendment? No. Sorry, Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to speak on both, if that's all right. Thank you to Councillor Donnelly for bringing the motion and to Councillor Harkin for the amendment. We are happy to support both the substantive and the amendment. The Palestine Action prisoners are on hunger strike, and you don't go on hunger strike easily. They're doing that because they feel that this has been politically motivated prosecutions. We within Derry and Strabane have been at the forefront of Palestine solidarity, and I think it's reasonable that we would meet with activists, their families and representatives to see what we can do to support them. Over the past few years that I've been on council, there's been lots of campaign groups and activist groups that have come in and presented at various committees. So I think part of our job as elected reps is listening to people and seeing what we can do to help them. And there's no reason that this would not be the same. So in the SLP, we're happy to support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McDade. Any other indicated speaker? Sorry, Councillor Barr.
Just briefly, Mayor. We in the Island of Ireland have a lived experience of the consequences of hunger strikes, both for families and communities. I agree with Councillor Donnelly's motion, and in particular his request for a delegation to meet with prisoners' families and their representatives in an effort to prevent the deaths of any of the prisoners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barr. Are members content that both the amendment and the motion passes without the support of the Ulster Unionist Party and the Democratic Unionist Party, which would mean okay. Amendments on the screen there. Can you explode that a wee bit? Pull that up a wee bit. That's fine. Okay, members, as I said, they're just are members content that everybody is in
Calling
support.
for a recorded vote.
Councillor Hussey is asking for a recorded vote, so he doesn't need a seconder for that, does he? No. Okay, I'll ask for a recorded vote then.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And this is on the amendment.
Yeah.
Alderman Cook,
Against.
Alderman Hussey,
Against?
Alderman Carrigan,
Against?
Alderman McMorris,
Against.
Alderman Middleton,
Against.
Alderman Montgomery,
Against.
Alderman Wilkinson,
Against?
Councillor Jason Barr,
For?
Councillor Lillian Barr, Councillor Raymond Barr,
For?
Councillor Boggs, Councillor Boyle,
For?
Councillor Clark, Councillor Cusick,
Or.
Councillor Devine, Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Alex Duffy, Councillor Sandra Duffy, Councillor Farrell,
For?
Councillor Fleming,
Tab?
Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Harkin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Heaney, Councillor Hutton, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Leonard, Councillor Logue,
Or.
Councillor McDade,
Or.
Councillor McGinley, Councillor McHugh, Councillor Mooney, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Norris,
Or?
Councillor O'Farrell,
Tab?
Councillor Riley, Councillor Tierney, Councillor Neelis. Thank you, members.
Councillor Alex Duffy is online for.
Mayor, I've recorded 31 for, 7 against. So the amendment passes.
Okay, members, so we'll now take the vote. Having the amendment passed, so we'll now take a vote on the substantive motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Do any members wish to change their vote? It'll be recorded.
Mayor, just for clarification, I'm not changing my vote, but the votes are taken then as automatically recorded. Is that correct?
They will be recorded. Do members wish them to be recorded in a similar fashion to the vote on the amendment? Okay, so it's 31 for and 7 against the substantive motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so Councillor Donnelly, your motion has passed. Councillor Harkin, to move your
Chair,
motion.
can I just give a quick
Sorry,
comment on it,
Councillor
Chair?
Donnelly, yes,
Sorry,
you
I'll
can sum up.
Chair, I'd just like to thank all those who voted in favour of that. In regards to the record goes, people who voted for this are on the right side of history. Unfortunately, there's people within this chamber who will question the legality or illegality of a motion when they've sat on the fence regarding a genocide that criminal courts, European criminal courts, have said that genocide has taken place and men, women and children are being systematically slaughtered. Starvation is being used as a weapon. So, you know, this will be recorded. Those who voted for this motion will be on the right side of history.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Our next motion is Councillor Harkin to move. Councillor Harkin, do you have seconder?
Thank you, Mayor. Can I take the motion as read?
Yeah, seconded by Councillor Raymond Barr.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm sure every councillor and elder person in the chamber is aware that there are lanes and alleyways that are not in great shape right across our council district. I've been contacted by residents about the state of their back lanes, and sometimes I've actually organised a group of people myself to go and clean them. And you're talking sometimes about weeds that are 7 feet high. You'll have fly tipping, you'll have thrown away washing machines. You'll have broken glass, and all of this is obviously very frustrating for residents. But it's also a health and safety risk for young children in particular. It's a risk for elderly people who are trying to access their back lanes with bins, or maybe trying to access their backyards. I think it has a mental impact in terms of people's health and well-being as well. So I think we would like to see these lanes cleaned up, and when you do it once, you go back there 3 months and it's the same. And obviously individuals who live in a street, or a councillor or councillors, or a group of people who are volunteers, maybe don't have the capacity to do it constantly. I know that many housing executive and housing association lanes are actually very well maintained, and workers will be out there regularly cleaning them up. But that's not the case with everybody's laneways. And so that, just to acknowledge that it's not every lane that is in bad shape. I know that there's some organisations around the city who, and probably across the district, who get some funding to do lane cleanups, sometimes when requested by residents. But my understanding is that those organisations are not properly funded to do this work in a systematic and ongoing way. So I think that this is something that the council should look at. I think we should do a bit of mapping to understand how many lanes are in bad shape. I think we should look at strategies to clean up the lanes. I've seen places in lanes in Belfast that have been cleaned up, where residents are now using them to organise events in. So there's been where the laneways are transformed into places where people are proud of, and that has come with funding and help, not necessarily through council, but through various funding streams. So I just think that this is a bit of work that the council should take on. I think a lot of residents will welcome the attempt to try and do something about the frustrations that they have with their laneways. So that's the basic motion, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Harkin. Councillor Barr, do you want to add to it?
Thank you, Mayor. I raised this issue, the issue of the lack of lighting and paths and alleyways at the back of houses in Ballycoman and Chestnut Park in Strabane a few years ago. I discovered that DFA Roads had decided not to replace or renew street lighting that served this purpose, with residents being advised to install sensor lights at their own expense. I was told at the time that this was to be general policy across all council districts. This decision was made without public consultation and with little or no regard for public safety. A lot of these back alleys back onto pensioners and disabled accommodation and are used for access and for leaving bins out and so forth. Now at night time, they're a haven for antisocial behaviour, dog fouling, fly tipping. As I said, a lot of the laneways back onto elderly accommodation, and the lack of lighting leaves some of these residents terrified to go out the back door. Year after year, rates are increased, but services are being reduced. I feel DFA, when adopting and implementing this new policy, deliberately came up with a new and confusing policy criteria designed to create uncertainty around responsibility. I'd like to thank Councillor Harkin for bringing this motion.
Thanks for that, councillor Barr. Councillor Cusick.
Thank you, Mayor. And as Councillor Harkin said, this is probably one of the most, I don't know, the most familiar issues that everybody has dealt with, especially in the city and district. And I know I have for all the time I've been a councillor, and even before I've dealt with it, especially around the Rosemount areas, university areas, Strand Road, anywhere where there's terraced houses and lanes in between. And we know one of the main problems is ownership, responsibility. And a lot of these areas also have multiple occupation, they're rented out. The tenants in it are transit. They don't have that community responsibility or feel obliged to look after the areas. So they do become dumping grounds, and then we have the wall block of who picks it out, who disposes of it, who cleans it, who maintains it, who pays for it, more to the point, and that's another hurdle that is very, very difficult to get over. Now, I have to commend council staff. They have been really responsive in areas it's not their responsibility, especially enforcement. They've been really proactive, but the problem is catching the culprits. And then once one set leaves, you get another group who come in and continue to do that and disrespect the areas. Coincidentally, it's it's 5 years since there was a very, very similar motion to this week actually, and sadly we've seen little or no progress on that motion or real positive action or pro-action. Again, we've fallen back into, it's up to volunteers, it's up to community groups, it's up to somebody else. And I myself have participated in a number of these projects, picking up litter and cleaning up lanes. And it's sheer frustration at the end of the day, because when you come back a month or so later, it's all back to normal, it's all back to the same. And therefore people go, well, what's the point? What is the point? So, I thank Councillor Harkin for bringing this motion, but we really need something more tangible, something more robust going forward to really tackle this issue, because, putting up a motion and saying, yeah, we're going to do it, and not getting there 5 years later shows that we're failing in some shape or form. And, I don't know, I have no answers to all this. No, I don't think anybody has the answers, but the sheer fact that we try a bit harder would be appreciated. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, councillor Cusick. Councillor John Boyle.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Harkin actually for bringing forward what is a more than timely motion, to be honest with you, Sean, because, and Councillor Cusick's right as well, we talked about this some considerable time ago, but there just seemed to be some degree of inertia around being able to tackle what is rightly it's clear in Councillor Harkin's motion, the difficulties that people are experiencing, and actually the frustrations that people have with this as well. There are organisations, but they are significantly underfunded, and it's a bit much to expect them to tackle this singularly. They need our push and our support on this as well. I look forward, and I expect this motion will pass, Mayor, and I look forward to seeing the papers as they come through. More than happy to join the working group as well, as and when that might come through as a proposal. I mean, we could probably, all of us, point to instances where constituents have approached us about the state of their their laneways, alleyways, call them what you want. And we refer some of them on, but you know, Councillor Harkin's right. Sometimes when you see these alleyways with your own eyes, you can't believe how long they look to have been, you know, neglected. There are weeds as high as your waist sometimes. There obviously is a health and safety element to all of this, particularly for the elderly, particularly for those with disabilities and the young. And many people actually come to me and say that they're finding difficulty even just bringing their bins out for the refuse collectors to pick up. And I really do believe that it is something that we need to start to begin to look at tackling. I think it's absolutely a perfectly good example of the kind of work that we can all put our shoulder to, Mayor. And I will, just briefly. And I think we know it's a big challenge. We all know it's going to be a big challenge. There are older, more established environments across the city and district, particularly in the Moor where I represent, and particularly in Foyleside where I previously represented, Mayor. So I'm well aware of the situation and the problems with it. But actually, that shows the size of the problem. It's a big piece of work for this city and district council to take on, but that shows the size of the problem. That shows the concerns of all of our citizens, and we have a responsibility to them. Those are the people who put us here. And I think we would all agree that we should always do our best to try and do our best for them. So thank you, Mayor, and I'll leave it at that. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor, and can I sincerely thank Councillor Harkin for bringing this motion. It's exactly the sort of motion that we should be discussing in this chamber. It is one that specifically affects the council area, its residents, etc. That's what we should be talking about in this chamber. That's what we're here for. We're here to represent our electors. I welcome the motion, and as is rightly pointed out by Councillor Cusack, it was in here 5 years ago. So can we this time, and I'm sure this motion is going to pass unanimously, can we this time ensure that there is action taken? And with regard to the last paragraph, a task force involving officers and members, I think it's been alluded to. Given the nature of ownership of all of these back alleys, whether it's various agencies, whether it's individuals, private bodies, etc., we probably need greater input than just officers and members. But I'm sure that's something that can be brought in a paper as to how the group will be constituted. But I sincerely thank Councillor Harkin for the motion, which I, and I'm sure my party colleagues, will wholeheartedly endorse and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for allowing me in. I have two very slight amendments there, isn't it? And it's just as Teresa will have, hopefully. Just stating as relating really to what Alderman Hussey's just stated there, in conjunction with DFI, Housing Executive and other appropriate stakeholders, because I feel that it is quite a large bit of work to be left in the hands of council. There's a large area to cover, and a lot of these parts of ground are either DFA controlled or housing executive controlled, or so it's working with them. If we can map what is the housing executives, at least then that takes the pressure off us, and it takes the pressure off, because I mean it's not just within the city. I mean I can think of many areas, you know, and the Kiln and Ardstraw and the Castleberg. It comes out very far throughout our council area, and I mean we've had issues there. An issue there about a lady who tripped where a streetlight had been there and the streetlight taken away, and a lady fell on Kiln and hurt herself quite severely. So there's those issues there. So it's how we deal with these other agencies and trying to see what can council, because council sometimes are doing too much or doing more than they should be, or it was in their remit, as we know with DFI and other things. And even as my colleagues had stated earlier, you know, when there's a state surveys, then the council do their bit and the housing executive do their bit, and it's often DFI who maybe have not stepped up to the plate and doing their bit when the next year's estate survey comes round. So it's trying to get those things pushed, Chair. And again, some of these may well be under private ownership as well, and it's trying to identify those owners and making them step up to the mark, because but I feel that it's better to include those at this stage. But I say more than happy to support the motion, but it's just a slight amendment because I do feel it's a lot bigger work than anticipated. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman. I just need to get a seconder for those amendments. Alderman Cook. I don't envisage anybody wants to address the slight amendments. Any other indicated speakers? We have Councillor Nenis.
And I'm happy to address both. Councillor Hargan, for bringing this motion in. I completely agree with your frustration around these areas which have been neglected by various statutory bodies, and the navigation that's needed to find out who owns what lane. Sometimes it's, it is really frustrating when you're trying to help residents. And just in terms of your wording in the motion around the clean-up solutions and community input, I just want to take this minute to really just appreciate in my own area the great work that's done by various organisations such as the Glen Development Initiative, the Conservation Volunteers and Teamworks. In terms of funding, Teamworks do have 5 core staff members full-time funded through the DFC. Now, they're not exclusively active in cleaning up the lanes, but they do a lot of work for us in our area, and we're really appreciative of them. They cover all areas in the city side outside of the Triax area. Work with volunteers, they work with residents, and they work with hard-to-reach young adults to bring back that sense of pride and ownership into these neglected areas. They also work as a social enterprise. They win contracts through housing associations. So I think, in terms of, I understand that this needs done, but there are organisations out there that are doing this work to a really good standard. And I, for one, as a councillor, I'm really appreciative of the work that Teamworks do. So I just want to put it on record, my thanks to Benny and his team. Community organisations outside of Teamworks work along with local men's and women's groups like men's sheds, hen sheds to apply for funds such as Live Here, Love Here. And they revive and maintain their own lanes, and this shows a great sense of community spirit, and I've seen a couple of examples of those as well. And then, complete conflict of interest here as a family member, but Maureen and Jim Neelis and Abercorn Terrace, who have their street completely Instagrammable, used by weddings, and different people go up there for photo shoots. It's absolutely stunning, and if you haven't been, just go up and take a minute there and see what can be done with the likes of these terrace house streets. So I completely support your motion. I do think that we need to look at this as a council, but I do just want to recognise the hard work that's gone in through the different community organisations and through Teamworks, and how they're making a massive difference to our communities every day. Garmiaga.
Thank you, Councillor Nenis. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for Councillor Hargan bringing this motion. Totally agree with it. And community activism, including local cleanups, is something that I really enjoy being involved in. And Sinn Féin activists have initiated a number of cleanups in Strabane, Sayan and Clary over the past number of years, and we've worked with different community groups and organisations that have asked us to come in and help them in that. It's an excellent opportunity to make a difference to your local communities, improving the general appearance of many areas. And that's not to say that statutory bodies should not be held to account for areas of responsibility. However, there are instances where responsibility may fall into the grey area. And if we can find solutions to this, it would be most welcome. And as other councillors have spoken, sometimes trying to figure out who owns what, and you call the housing executive, they say they don't own it. You talk to the DFI, they say they don't own it. So if we can find a solution to those problems. Something that I've noticed when these cleanups are happening is the banter and crack that takes place between people out on the ground, and we talk about mental health. It's great to see people out contributing in a positive manner to their communities and also helping their own mindfulness. Can I also mention too the assistance that council workers provide in some of these cleanups and the collection of rubbish gathered. I know in Strabane we have Brian Farrell. I can pick up the phone to Brian, and he'll do anything within his remit. He might say about maybe he's understaffed in the resources, but I'm sure there's a Brian Farrell everywhere in the council area. So I'd just like to thank council workers for all their assistance in that regard. So Councillor Harkin, thanks for bringing this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Mayor. And Councillor Boyle has covered the bones of the motion for us, so I'll not go on too long. Just to say that in terms of the amendments, we're happy to support them, and it's following on from Councillor
pardon me, Councillor Nillis's points, particularly around teamworks, and the work that they do. I'm sure many councillors across this district have Benny and the guys down there tortured. But in both of the amendments, it mentions appropriate stakeholders. My view would be that organisations such as Teamworks have a tremendous amount of experience and expertise in this field, and should be considered as an appropriate stakeholder. And will they be invited if and when the motion passes to join the task force? Because I think if we are serious about tackling this issue, it's people like Teamworks that we need around that table to help and support council and the other organisations to make headway in this, Chair. Mayor, sorry.
Thanks, Brian. Councillor Logue.
Thank you, Mayor. And I suppose just from my own area that I represent, I want to give a mention to Triax Neighbourhood Management Team, who also have done great work in conjunction with residents, where residents are able to go out. They really they do the Triax Neighbourhood Management Team would do the heavy work, and then hopefully would encourage residents to try and maintain it then too as well. But also, like Councillor Hart has said, I want to acknowledge the help of the council too, because you know they are called to help them dispose of big ticket items such as washing machines and whatever else they come across. So, but I do hope that they would also be part of this working group, because I think everybody that does work in that field needs to be around the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Logue and Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Harkin. I know it's been well discussed, and I suppose even before coming on this meeting, this motion sparked a lot of conversation internally within our team, and it shows how often and for how long we've been contacted about these issues and how we've been working to try and address them. And I suppose just go back to the point that there's frustration in relation to the lack of ability for statutory partners to step on and do work. The community sector has stepped up, residents have stepped up, there's volunteer organisations have stepped up. There's and like well, Councillor Monet would know, there's not only have groups stepped up, there was actually groups set up to address the issue as well. And you know, the Midwater Side Residents Association were primarily set up to try and clean up the laneways and within their area to address issues around like access to their funds, or address issues in the back of vulnerable people slipping and falling whilst passing the laneways. So there's a lot of tremendous work that's going on within our council, and I'm glad to see that there's an amendment here that actually reflects that and invites others to be part of the conversations as well. So we look forward to the work of the working group, but in the meantime, we know that this work and that the community involved, the sector, volunteers and local groups are continuing to actively work to address the issues that we experience within our laneways. So just to add my tuppence and give a plug for the Midwater Side Residents group that had been specifically set up. They look at this and address this, and we don't need to go as far as Belfast to see what groups have done. No, we can see in the waterside how organisations have carried out work, secured funding, they animate, they clean up and provide planters vegetation within the back lanes to make them more attractive and a more healthy place to be. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson and Councillor Minnie.
Thank you, Chair. It just came on because Councillor Jackson referenced me, but I think actually when I was talking about it, my only experience would be for the Midwater side, because I mean, they would be a sort of community model on this basis. When we're talking about like that, when we're talking about community cleanups, that organisation at the end of August this year did a whole weekend cleaning up around the Midwater side itself, Derrick Street and every place, and they even got funding. They hired out a digger and a dumper truck, a mini dumper truck, and spent a whole weekend clearing through sites and clearing up laneways, which probably been neglected for years and years and years. Looking at the growth when I was down there, but that aside, I think obviously this motion is welcome. It sort of kind of reminds me of what can we do, because with the private streets members working group, and sometimes you confront the realisations that statutory bodies won't go in the areas, especially like those muse lanes, because they are unregistered land and looking for ownership. But I think it's a good motion. I think the working group is going to be good, because it'll allow all those bodies, statutory and non-statutory, to come in, like Midwater side, like Teamworks and Triax. You have extensive experience in this area, and you might have ideas about how we can overcome these issues. So I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great motion, and thank you to Councillor Hargan for bringing it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, reading the room here, I think the amendment is unanimous, and the substantive motion as well we can take as unanimous. So Councillor Harkin, I'll hand back to you just to sum up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks everybody for their comments. I think they were very useful. And to the amendment from Alderman Kerrigan, I completely agree. I think that the statutory organisations and the other stakeholders should be very much involved in this. And my thinking was that when we actually set up the task force, members would have a discussion about who we would want to invite to be part of the discussion. And there is good work being done. And I acknowledge that there is different organisations who have workers that go out and address these things, and there's also lots of volunteering, lots of community efforts, and I think that the people want to see these laneways and alleyways cleaned up, and that's why a lot of that happens. I do think that where there's issues where statutory bodies have responsibility and are not acting on them, that has to be addressed. And then I think that anything that is a good model that people are doing, we should be highlighting that and finding ways then to replicate it. And that means looking for funding streams or potential funding streams. So I think that anybody with expertise, anybody with ideas, plus hearing people who are on the ground doing this type of work, hear their frustrations, because I think what we need is, rather than having a one-off cleanup that happens once a year, because residents complain or put in phone calls, or because there's a community organisation committed to it, we need some sort of regularised system where people know where to go and know that, like, every summer your back alleyway is going to be cleaned up, and here's some ideas for how to maintain it, and here's how we can actually support you. Council can try to facilitate some of this, but it definitely is not Council's responsibility to address all this. But I think that in other ways, in other task forces that we have set up, we can facilitate the discussions and the actions.
Okay, members, that brings us to the end of our motions for today's meeting. So item 13 is our sealing list.
Members, just the usual papers seeking authority in relation to the sealing list.
Proposed Councillor Boyle. Seconded Alderman McMorris. Item 14 is responses to motions. A member? No. Item 15 is resolutions from other councils. No. So, members, that concludes our meeting for today. Thank you for your attendance and safe home.
Thank you, Mayor.